Welcome to our second episode of Looking Ahead to Keeping Water Clean, Reducing Risk in the Maitland Valley and Ausable Bayfield Source Protection Areas. Today, on our second episode, we're talking about risk management plans and the tools that your local Source Protection Committee can use to work with municipalities and with property owners to keep your municipal sources of drinking water clean. We have a special guest here today, and it is Jenna Allain, and she is Program Supervisor with, and it's a very long name, Ausable Bayfield Maitland Valley Drinking Water Source Protection. I'm Tim Cumming, I'm Communications Specialist, and I really appreciate you, Jenna, talking to us today about risk management.
Great, thanks for having me here, Tim. And thanks for hosting this program. As we look ahead towards implementation of source protection plan policies, this information is really important to anyone that may be required to follow a risk management plan. And I'd also like to thank all of our municipalities and our community members for all of the efforts they have made in developing our source protection plans and coming up with policies that will be effective and implementable for our region.
And if I can add a thank you, I'd like to thank this television station for creating this public service opportunity to speak to you about these planning policies which may affect you, and so we thought you would be interested in knowing more about them. In our last program, we talked about what drinking water source protection is, about protecting your municipal sources of drinking water by, for instance, managing some of the activities that take place near your municipal well, if your source of water is groundwater. Today we're going to move into another topic, which is risk management plans. So last episode we talked about source protection plans, and today you're going to throw something new at me, risk management plans. What's the difference between those two kinds of plans?
Right, so a local committee, a local source protection committee created two separate plans, one for the Ausable Bayfield area and one for the Maitland Valley area, and these were these plans were created to protect municipal drinking water supplies in those areas, and those are called the source protection plans. A risk management plan, on the other hand, is one that is a plan that's specific to an individual property to protect drinking water supplies by managing an activity on that property.
So in the case of source protection plans, how many are there?
There's two source protection plans, one for the Ausable Bayfield Source Protection Area and one for the Maitland Valley Source Protection Area.
And in the case of risk management plans, how many would there be?
Well, that's an estimated number at this point, but between 500 and 600 risk management plans are currently estimated as being required for our region.
Okay, so can you explain more what that risk management plan entails?
Sure. So a risk management plan, as I said, is a site-specific plan specific to a home, a business, a farm, an institution, or a recreational property to make sure that the activities on those properties are being managed correctly to protect the community's drinking water supply.
Okay. So how do you establish a risk management plan? You start from scratch and you're going to have one of these plans. How does it get established?
So in most cases, the risk management plan will be a negotiated process between the landowner engaged in the activity and someone called a risk management official. Okay,
can you explain what this risk management official is? Who has this official? Like who do they work for? Whom do they work for?
So the risk management official is a municipal official. Mm-hmm. That person is designated by the municipality to negotiate all of the risk management plans required in a given municipality, and they are required to undertake specific training and be certified as a risk management official, and that training will include things like biosecurity, health and safety requirements, and that official will negotiate with the property owner and come up with a plan that will contain appropriate measures to protect drinking water.
And how soon does this property owner and risk management official, if they have to negotiate this plan, how soon do they have to have that in place?
So once the plans take effect, which we anticipate could be as early as next year, the risk management official will start going out and contacting landowners, in some cases to verify that an activity is indeed considered a potential threat to drinking water and ensure that a risk management plan is indeed required. And they'll start working with that landowner, but the actual plan does not need to be in place until 3 years after the plan takes effect.
So this program has been taped in 2012, so it could be plans or source protection plans in 2013, and then there'd be another 3 years to actually get the risk management plan in place.
Right.
Excellent. So what kinds of things would be included in this risk management plan?
There's a fair bit of flexibility, and there's no prescribed format for the risk management plan, but the document would include things like property information, the information about the threat activity, any mapping, relevant mapping, in terms of corrective actions or any remedial action plan that may be necessary, the legal requirements, and then, of course, probably some signatures.
Okay, so walk me through the creation of this plan. What are the steps in this?
So the development of a risk management plan is essentially a 6-step process. The first step being to actually take a look at the source protection plans themselves and ensure that a risk management plan is required. You would have to refer to the proposed plans for both either the Ausable Bayfield or the Maitland Valley plans, and given the threat activity, ensure that a risk management plan is required. And you'd also want to check the policies to see if there are any provisions included that may need to be incorporated into the risk management plan. An example would be for fuel storage. The policies in the plans specify that the risk management plan be based on current Ontario regulations such as the Liquid Fuels Handling Code.
Excellent. Okay. So we've reviewed the plans. We've checked to see if risk management's in place. We've compared what's in place with the recommendations. Is that how that works?
Well, so the next step would be to check for any risk management measures that are already in place on the property. So in some cases, people may already be taking all of the right steps to manage a threat activity. And in those cases, maybe no additional additional measurements are required. And based on what's actually occurring on a property will directly impact the scope of the risk management plans themselves. Now the next step will be to compare the management measures that are already in place with a resource called the Risk Management Measures Catalog. Now the catalog is an online resource, and it was created by the province, and it outlines all of various management measures to address the various drinking water threat activities. And so that would be the third step. The fourth step would be to consider any site-specific conditions or limitations. So in some cases, not all of the measures listed in the catalog may be appropriate for a given property, given site-specific conditions or limitations. And then the final, or the fifth step would be to conduct a gap analysis.
Okay, and a gap analysis, that sounds like one of those things that I don't know very much about, so you might have to explain that to me.
Right. So a gap analysis is something that the risk management official would conduct by looking at what's currently being done to manage an activity and how effective that is in compared to the best possible solution for protecting drinking water.
Okay, and is that all our steps? Or?
No, so the final step.
Okay, well, the final one, good.
Final step would be that the risk management official would apply their professional judgment based on all of the information that they have and set out a plan or a recommendation for a plan that would establish management measures that are both practical and acceptable for the landowner.
Okay, so it sounds like you have some plans and some steps in place to how you create a risk management plan. But it might be good for me or for some of the people watching to have a practical example of how that would work. Can you provide me with an actual example of how a risk management plan might work?
Sure. So let's take an example of an auto shop, and we have a picture here that that displays an example of a wellhead protection area, and you can see that the auto shop is pictured in the pink square, and it's located in the 5-year time of travel around a municipal well where the vulnerability score is 4.
Okay, so a vulnerability score, you're going to have to explain that. You said a score of 4. I don't know if a score of 4 is high or low. What are you scoring when you say vulnerability score? Can you explain that?
Sure. So all of our vulnerable areas and our wellhead protection areas around municipal wells have been given a score based on their vulnerability. Now, scores range from 2 to 10, 10 being the most vulnerable, 2 being the least vulnerable.
So can you give me an example? Like a 10 is the most vulnerable. What kind of area is the most vulnerable?
Yeah, so there's a 100-meter ring drawn around all municipal wells, and that area always has a score of 10. And that's considered the most vulnerable area. And the general rule is the closer you get to the well, the higher the vulnerability score is going to be. There are some exceptions to this. You could have an abandoned well that hasn't been properly decommissioned, and that would raise the vulnerability score, so you may have a higher vulnerability where those sorts of things are located as well.
So that area that's 100 meters around the well, you're saying that is vulnerable because there's a relationship between the how close that property is to the well?
Precisely, yes. So that 100-meter ring is considered the most vulnerable area. It's located very close to the well, so any activities that could pose a potential threat to drinking water are certainly a higher risk in those immediate areas right around a well.
And the risk being that a contaminant could get from that location near the well into the water, into the municipal water?
Right, into the groundwater supply.
Okay, so you've told me that a vulnerability score of 10 is high, and that a property that's within 100 meters of a well, that's a very vulnerable area. What's another area that might have a high score?
So there's also a ring. It's called a 2-year time of travel, and it's a ring drawn, another ring drawn around the municipal well within the wellhead protection area. And in most cases, there's some parts of that 2-year time of travel that could also have a score of 10.
Okay, so it could have a score of 10. What would make the score higher in one case in that 2-year time of travel and lower in the other? Why would there be a higher and lower score there?
Right. So vulnerability is also dependent on how close you are to the well, but also the vertical vulnerability. So how deep the aquifer is, the types of soils overlying that aquifer. If you've got a shallow aquifer with potentially porous soils, you're going to have a higher vulnerability, and that's where you see higher vulnerability scores in that 2-year time of travel. Okay,
so you have scores of 10 for that property that's within 100 meters of a well, a vulnerability score of 10. You can, in some cases, have a vulnerability score of 10 in the 2-year time of travel. But the example you're giving me of the auto shop, that is a vulnerability score of 4. So is that because it's farther away from the well?
Right, so a vulnerability score of 4 is considered quite low, and for the most part, there aren't any drinking water threat activities that are any activities that are considered a drinking water threat in those areas where the score is so low.
Yeah. Or they're not considered significant.
Exactly, not considered a significant threat. However, there's a particularly harmful type of chemical, and these are called dense non-aqueous phase liquids, or DNAPLs. And they're particularly nasty because they're quite dangerous from a human health standpoint, and they are extremely difficult and expensive to remove from a water supply once they contaminate. So these types of chemicals are a significant threat anywhere within the 5-year time of travel.
Okay, so and that's why in this case, even though the vulnerability score is low, you still have a threat that can be significant, these
Right.
dense non-aqueous phase liquids.
Right, so we've got another image of our auto shop property. And just to give you a little bit of history, the auto shop's been operating since the 1970s. It's on municipal services, and that it gets municipal water and municipal sewers, so there's no septic system. And if you see on the property, there is a wash station there where they do store these dense non-aqueous phase liquids, these particularly harmful types of chemicals, and that is why they've been identified as having a significant drinking water threat.
Okay, so we have these chemicals that are called dense non-aqueous phase liquids. They're harmful to human health. They're heavier than water. They're impossible or expensive to remove. They're nasty. We don't want them in the water. Okay. You've given us an example of an auto shop, and this auto shop has to find ways to keep its chemicals from getting into that municipal water. What tool are they going to use to do that?
Well, that's correct, and the first step, as we went through in terms of developing a risk management plan, is to actually ensure that a risk management plan is required. So you need to go to the source protection plans, and if you look up the policies for dense non-aqueous phase liquids, you will see that a risk management plan is required wherever those types of chemicals are stored in quantities greater than 25 liters within the 5-year time of travel. So in this case, our auto shop meets those circumstances, and a risk management plan is required.
So the policies regarding these harmful chemicals that you call dense non-aqueous phase liquids, they wouldn't pertain to someone who has nail polish or nail polish remover or some chemical in a small quantity. It's 25 liters or more.
It has to be more than 25 liters, that's correct. So the next step would be for the risk management official to look at what sorts of management measures are already in place. What sorts of things is the landowner already doing to ensure the safe storage of those chemicals? So if you looked at our next image here, you'll see the storage area, and you can see that these chemicals are being stored in an elevated position above ground. So now that we know that, the next step would be to refer to the risk management catalog and determine what sorts of things the catalog suggests in terms of management measures for the storage of DNAPLs.
And so what kinds of measures might that be?
Right, so if you had referred to the catalog, you would see there's a number of things that are suggested. The first being some kind of secondary containment. And that could be a double-walled tank for the storage drums, an overflow tray in the event of a spill, or having an enclosed storage area. Another option is to develop a spill contingency plan in the event of a spill, and this could coincide with the installation of some sensors, high and low sensors, that would be able to detect a leak or a spill if that were to happen. Another management measure would be to routinely monitor and inspect your storage drums, your storage tanks, and your equipment to ensure that there's no leaks or spills happening. And the other management measure would be to completely remove the threat by switching to an alternative product which is not considered a DNAPL. Okay,
so how many steps is that? 1, 2, 3. Are we done, or got more? Oh, we got more to go. How many more to go? 3 more?
Right.
Okay.
So the fourth step would be to consider any site-specific conditions or limitations to implement the measures outlined in the catalog. So if you consider the secondary containment, a limitation may be the cost of installing a double-walled tank or an overflow tray, or an enclosed storage area. There would be costs associated with this, but if those were installed, it would significantly decrease the risk of that spill ever reaching the water supply. In terms of developing a spill contingency plan and installing high and low level sensors, again, a cost associated with developing that plan and installing the sensors, but the upside of that is you'd have a much quicker response time in terms of responding to a spill and cleaning up a spill if it were to happen. In terms of switching to an alternative product, again, costs associated with searching out and finding and purchasing this new product, and there may not be that product available or a product that's feasible to switch to. So those are the sorts of limitations that would impact this example.
So as you're going, excuse me, as you're going through those steps, the risk management official and the property owners are going to have to discuss those.
Right, yeah, exactly. So they would be reviewing all that information together. So the next step is to conduct the gap analysis. And in this case, you look at what measures are already in place and compare that to the suggested measures in the catalog. So in this case, the only measure that's in place is that those storage drums are elevated and they're above ground. So that's a good first step. But based on the measures outlined in the catalog, there is a gap there where some management measures need to be established through the risk management plan. So that brings us to the final step, which is where the risk management official applies their professional judgment and considers all the information and establishes a remedial action plan for the landowner to consider in terms of the risk management plan. So there's kind of two options that a risk management official in this case might provide. The first option would be sort of a phased approach to installing some management measures. So the first would be to make sure that the landowner is inspecting and monitoring their storage facility to detect any leaks or spills on a regular basis, and that could start happening immediately. The next step would be to install some kind of secondary containment, whether that's the double-walled tank, an overflow tray, or an enclosed storage area, and that might be required within 3 months. And then within 6 months, the landowner would be required to develop that spill contingency plan and install some sensors on their storage tanks to be able to alert them if a spill or a leak were to occur. So that would be one option that would be presented to the landowner, and then the other option would be to switch to an alternative product, and that could be done within 6 months.
Okay, so thank you, Jenna, for having provided a practical example of a risk management plan put into practice in the case of an auto shop, to give people that are watching this, and particularly people that will have to implement these policies, to understand it in a practical, concrete sense. And I understand that in some cases, some of the measures might be low cost, in some cases no cost, and in some cases it might actually save a business money, but in other cases there might be some costs involved here. If that's the case, are there financial incentives to help offset some of the costs to the property owner?
Well, at this current time, at the time of our taping here today, there are grants available for eligible landowners in wellhead protection areas, and this funding is for voluntary projects, and their financial incentives through the Ontario Drinking Water Stewardship Program. And the types of projects that are eligible are things like well decommissioning or upgrading, septic system upgrading and decommissioning, fuel storage containment, chemical storage containment, runoff and erosion control projects, manure storage projects, and agricultural best management practices. So those are some of the sorts of things that the stewardship funding provides financial incentives for. And now that funding is available until December 1st of 2012. We don't yet know whether the province will continue to provide that funding beyond 2012. We certainly hope so, and we encourage you to keep checking our website at www.sourceprotectionstewardship.on.ca for updates on our stewardship program.
So, so if people want to know if they're eligible for this funding, if they want to know if there's still funding available, they can go to that website and keep up to date on the status to find out if there's funding through that program or other programs.
Exactly. Yep. Or they can call our staff and contact us directly. Our number's 519-235-2610, or you can call toll free 188-286-2610.
Thank you. We have been talking today with Jenna Allain, Program Supervisor with the Ausable Bayfield, Maitland Valley Drinking Water Source Protection Region. And thank you, Jenna, for being here, and thank you for making a complex issue easier to understand in terms of what risk management plans are, what they look like, and what property owners can do on their own properties to protect municipal drinking water sources. And Jenna has provided the information for you to keep current on source protection planning policies and risk management plans. Once again, that website, sourcewaterinfo.on.ca. The phone numbers, once again, 519-235-2610, or toll free 1-888-286-2610. You've been watching Looking Ahead to Keeping Water Clean, Reducing Risk in the Ausable Bayfield, Maitland Valley Drinking Water Source Protection Region. Thank you so much for joining us. Phone us with your questions, and we would like to provide one final thanks to this station for their commitment to public service by providing this information to property owners who may be interested in the progress of proposed source protection planning policies and in risk management plans and source protection plans. Thank you for watching. I'm Tim Cumming.